Hello, and
welcome to the Woman's Cave.
Why we did it together? Like
together.
high five,
Social distance
though,
style.
because you know it's COVID out here,
Whatever
y'all. Don't touch
happened to
people's
the
hands.
Ebola elbow?
It's because I watched this thing, and then they tell you how to like cough in your elbow, and then you're like touching elbows. I feel like maybe that's unsafe.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Let's just like high five or like, but like let's not actually touch. Like just be like, yeah, no, but no touching though, because it's Corona out here.
I think we should do that. We should have what we call the spatial shake.
Oh yeah, we should be like, hello,
spatial shake.
Spatial shake. I like it. I like the spatial shake. I think I'm gonna do that like even after this is gone.
Oh yeah, no,
I'm gonna be like, hey, no, don't touch my hand though. Like we're just gonna shake like I want to shake your hand, but Corona without his toothbrush. All right. Anyway, I'm Jade,
and I'm Nona, and we remember to introduce
ourselves.
Yep. I'm having
okay. So yeah.
I'm having clothing malfunctions.
She is because she took my dress, y'all. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know why she keeps taking my red dresses. She knows that these dresses are for an emergency if the house is burning down. These are the dresses that you run and get on so you do not look horrible when the news comes. And you will be like, hello, yes, my name is Jade, and I literally sleep in this fabulous dress every night. It's what I do. Fabulous. All right. Anyway, you want literary life guides with poetry, aka our books. And like some people want to call them poetry anthologies, although we were like number one in like Amazon poetry anthology. We like to call them literary life guides.
Please understand that the only reason we now accept the word anthology is because we were the number one bestseller for multiple days.
So that's why we accept it, but we don't really.
No.
We were like, I wonder if we could like ask Amazon if they could change it to literary life. Like that would be great. Anyway, here's a top 4, or actually 5. I don't know. Y'all, it's 4. Okay, so I guess I have to go with the one that was number 1, right? So it was
Women's Cave.
The Women's Cave and Other Pop Poems.
A Misfit
Guide. And I Thought I Did My Journey Alone. And I Thought Divorce Was Bad. And let me go with If Only I Were Me, because I'm just throwing in random titles because we have like 20 of them. So y'all, anything 23, right? So in magazines that have come out and stuff. So yeah, anything that your ladies are doing, because we've been in the house too long. And
quickly, can we tell people what this is?
The 25 hottest indie authors, artists, and advocate magazine. Okay, anything that your ladies are doing on www.andwethought.com. Ooh, that took longer than normal.
Yes, because I wanted to brag.
Y'all aren't here to hear about us. You're here to hear from our wonderful guests. Wonderful guests, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you for allowing me to do it. I never get to introduce myself. I guess I would introduce myself as Jessica Lahey. I'm an author. I've been a teacher for over 20 years, taught every grade from 6 to 12. So got them all in there, public and private school. And I've been a writer for the past, professionally for the past decade or so, with a column at the New York Times called The Parent Teacher Conference, and writing at The Atlantic and The Washington Post. And I wrote The Gift of Failure that came out in 2015 and hit the New York Times bestseller list, which was just a miracle. And I have a new book coming out in April called The Addiction Inoculation, and it's about preventing substance abuse in kids.
Ooh, that sounds like extremely interesting.
I feel like she's a real writer.
I know, right? And I'm glad you introduced yourself. And we like to have people introduce themselves because people know what they want.
I like it
about them. Like you know what you want me to know.
Well, it depends. It always depends on. It always depends on the audience. Sometimes the person introducing me feels like, oh, the audience is going to want to know like where she went to college, and I just don't think that that's very interesting information.
Well, now my first question is going to be like, where'd you go to college?
I know, right now that has to be the first question. So where did you go to college?
I went to University of Massachusetts for undergraduate school, and then I went to the University of North Carolina for law school.
Ooh, good food.
You ate well.
The University of North Carolina was
you were educated well.
I mean, you were educated well. I'm sorry.
But I mine immediately went to
barbecue. They went to like barbecue.
Yeah.
And it's just because you haven't been able to travel, right? So when you're not able to travel, you miss all the things. Like you're like, I didn't even know I really liked that until
that vinegary North Carolina barbecue from the Durham area. I do miss that a lot.
Right.
The pulled pork.
Did you go to the barbecue festival?
No, I didn't. But Bullock's Barbecue was where we always went if we were going to get barbecue. There was also a restaurant called Crook's Corner that made the best shrimp and grits ever. It was, we couldn't afford to go there very often because it was fancy and we were students, but
Yeah.
anytime we could afford it, we went there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
see, and this is the thing, like you don't know how much you miss eating in different states.
I know.
Like,
And of course, these days it's like, oh my gosh, dinner's happening again. Didn't it just happen like 15 minutes ago? And I'm going to have to cook something else now. And I have 2 kids at home with me right now. One just came home today. He's been in isolation in a COVID dorm because of an exposure he had at college, but he just got home today. So I finally have all my chicks in my nest, and that makes me very happy.
Oh, I feel horrible that you have to do an interview on the same day.
Well,
he's asleep. No, he's asleep upstairs. He's ignoring us at the moment. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
no, maybe he's just used to it because it's quarantine. Like, people? What do you need people for?
I don't even like talking. Like I got out of it 14 days ago. I got out of talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we should probably ask you about your writing.
Yeah, we should talk about your writing and then how your teaching influenced your writing.
Mm-hmm.
So number one.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Did you want to do how the teaching? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Start with how the teaching influenced your writing.
Well, the thing that's always interesting to me is what people choose to write about. I actually co-host a podcast called the #AmWriting podcast about just being a writer and getting the work done. And my co-hosts write completely different stuff that I write. One of them is a best-selling romance author, contemporary romance author, and one of them writes women's fiction, and they don't really want to write what I write, and I don't really want to write what they write, but it's the stuff that sort of feeds our soul. And so when I started writing about education, I did it mainly because my husband said, when you talk about what you do, that's what lights you up inside. And so at the time I was like, well, no one's going to want to read about teaching. Who's going to want to read about teaching? And I have been so thrilled to be wrong that, there are lots of teachers out there that also want to read about teaching. And it turns out that intersection of teaching and parenting is what really fires me up the most. Like how we parent our kids influences how they learn, and how education works influences relationships in our family. So that's my favorite happy place. And I'm just glad that I get to be here. I have a dream job. I get to read all the dorky research I want. And then my job is to translate it for readers. I love that job. It's perfect for me.
No, I love that for you. And yeah, there's a lot of people that want to read about teaching and education and parenting.
Yeah. Especially now.
Especially now. Right?
Now. Because they're like, wait, how do teachers do this thing called this?
Right.
Also, for people that aren't really teachers, or maybe people that, I was an interpreter and I read a bunch of books about teaching because I used school system. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, wait, I don't know exactly what a teacher does. Let me read some books.
And the idea that I can just learn about something new, like yesterday, speaking of what you did, yesterday I heard on the radio what it's like for someone who is hearing impaired to Zoom, like how much preparation is involved and how much of a hurdle it is to either not be entirely sure what's being said in the Zoom call, and that affects your confidence in speaking up in the, all these aspects, all these things that I hadn't thought about. And that's interesting to me. Other people's experiences and helping me understand other people's experiences. That's what just really fires me up. So
yeah, I'm just going to add something on to that. I'm not even sure if it really fits, but I just wanted to mention it because it popped up in my head. And so, yeah. So anyway, so when you were saying about one of the things that influences like in a Zoom call, I would think about on a normal everyday basis, like in some states, I'm not going to name the state, but in some states, 40% being able to translate information from like English to sign language, 40% is what you need to pass their certification test. So someone who's stuck in a Zoom call with an interpreter on the side is only getting 40% of a conversation. If they're in certain cities. So even if they were in the room with you, they're still only getting 40%. But can you imagine how much stress that is, knowing that you're only receiving 40% of the message, and then you have to hit Zoom and get where
I can't.
And then have that person only give 40% of what you're saying to the group, and you're hoping it's the right 40%.
And for kids, especially, that must just be agonizing. And especially during this period, we've been talking a lot about class participation and what counts as class participation. Should we be forcing kids to turn on their cameras? And someone tweeted just the other day, Twitter, by the way, is such a great place for educators. Someone tweeted the other day, well, what about the fact that, some you're in someone's home. What if someone's mother what if they're Muslim and the mother doesn't have her headscarf on and she doesn't want to be seen? What if the child is embarrassed to be seen? What if someone is ashamed of where they live or the conditions in which they live and they don't want to be? There's all these things that I think we have to work really hard to get outside of our own experience in our own heads to be able to understand maybe why a child is not participating, not turning on their camera, not responding. Hearing is just one of the many things that is beyond my personal little experience. So I love being able to think about how other kids are experiencing things.
Yeah, I was just having that conversation with an educator like a day or so ago, and I was like, yeah, it should be. Sometimes people don't have the best home situation, or maybe they live with 12 people. Who knows what's really going on in someone's home? Like, they're a great student when they go to school,
right? Well, and since we're going off on all these tangents, I mean, the thing that affects learning more than just about anything else is the level of stress that a kid is experiencing. So we know that in the brain, if you want to shut down learning, raise the stress. It interferes right away with the ability to retain information. And so, now for all of a sudden, we're looking inside kids' homes. That is for kids who are actually online, and a large number of kids are not actually participating in online school simply due to accessibility or whatever their reasoning is, or whatever the situation is. But all of a sudden we're looking into kids' lives and realizing, oh my gosh, the stressors that kids are facing that get in the way of their learning are multitudes. Things we can't even think of. So, I especially right now when I'm doing a lot of speaking to parents and teachers about how we can kind of give ourselves a break and give kids a break, is to realize that right now we should be focusing on making sure that we're emotionally healthy, that we're mentally healthy, and that we can show up for each other every once in a while, instead of being quite so worried about, getting a perfect score on that test on fractions.
I love her tangents. I love your tangents. Like, I appreciated them. Like,
so we have a few little soapboxes.
Yeah.
And, for Jade, it's mental health and education, and for me, it's domestic violence.
Yeah.
Looking pretty much, but that one's a little vain. So let's move on. No, it's right.
It is writing. So
let's get back to your actual writing.
Your actual
writing. My actually what I do and what we're supposed to be talking about. Sure.
Well, I mean, it was talking about what you do, and you have a new book coming out. What can you share with us about?
So
yeah.
So the new book, the substance abuse book, was a book that it took me a long time to sort of get to what it was I was going to write next. When you have a first book that, thank goodness, I'm so grateful, that has done well, there's that sophomore slump fear. You don't like, I couldn't just write like Gift of Failure Part 2. That's what I knew I didn't want to write, but I didn't know what I was going to write. It took me a couple of years, but I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I was raised by people who had substance abuse issues, and I have lots of relatives with substance abuse issues, and my husband's family has that stuff on his side of the family as well. So I have these two kids that I'm trying to raise under a certain amount of a genetic sort of predisposition to that. Plus, the last 5 years of my teaching career, I spent working with, I taught at an inpatient rehabilitation center, drug and alcohol rehab for kids. So I taught kids from the age, I think our youngest was 12, almost 13, all the way up to 18, who were in an inpatient rehab situation. And so kids who not only didn't really want to be in rehab, but really, really didn't want to be in school in rehab. But it was one of the best teaching experiences I have ever had. It made me focus on, what's really important in terms of helping kids discover who they are and figure out who they are and feel like they have this thing called self-efficacy and feel competent and feel confident going out in the world. So that stuff all came together in this book about what we as parents, educators, mentors, coaches, what we all can do to prevent substance abuse in kids, because it turns out substance abuse is preventable. So what can we control and what can we not? And what is the optimal, if I were queen of the world and I could make the perfect world, what would a really effective substance abuse prevention childhood, program look like for kids? So that's what that book is about. And, I had a blast writing it. It was so hard. It ended up being so much more memoir-y than I thought it was going to be. And I'm so grateful to the kids who told their stories, well, now adults who told their stories for that book.
That is
Wow.
beautiful.
That
I
is
cannot
beautiful.
wait to read it.
I know, right? I've
And
been listening to it on Audible. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah.
I get to read it. I get to read it. I got to read Gift of Failure too. And when I did Gift of Failure, obviously it was not COVID times. It was pre-COVID times. And I got to go to New York and record in the studio. So I was really curious how it was going to work this time. How do you record an audiobook when all this is going on? And so they said, well, we're going to try to find a studio near you that you can get to, and we'll see what works. And it turns out that there is a professional recording studio 4 miles from my house. I can like ride my bike to get there. So I'll be recording it in January, and then in April it'll come out. The audiobook will come out at the same time as the book itself.
But since you live in Vermont,
Yeah.
maybe you're not gonna bike to it because it's January.
Oh,
and it's cold.
I bike unless there's like sleet on the roads. Yeah, no, it's pretty close by. So we're pretty tolerant of all kinds of yuck on the roads. I've got like these spiky things I strap on my shoes so that I can walk on the ice. We go out no matter what.
Yeah, I have a fear of that. Someone was like, go up north for the winter and write a book. And I said, what for?
Yeah.
I don't want to be a hermit because I'm never leaving.
I'm
I don't
from
care what
Maryland.
I run out of.
I'm from Maryland. You get like a half an inch of snow.
Yeah.
We're like, what? Shut it down. Shut it down. Everything, shut it down. Half an inch of snow.
Yeah. No, I'm absolutely familiar with that, but I'm a Northeastern girl. I grew up in New England and I love it. I love the snow. I love the cold. I love the winter. So
you're never retiring to what, like Florida or like California?
I don't see it. I don't know. My husband though he's the one who would prefer we're in warmer climate, but no, I love it up here.
Oh,
it's perfectly fine with me if we get snowed in.
Yeah. Well, I like the snow too because it gives me an excuse to eat Oreos.
Yep.
Well, why do you need snow as an excuse to eat Oreos? You can just eat Oreos.
A rule
that we only eat Oreos when it snows. Now we did break the rule when the pandemic happened.
It was one time, y'all. I mean, and it was a pandemic.
We found like pandemic and snow were the equivalent of natural disasters. So one time we can eat Oreos.
Okay. I have a question for you though. Have you tried the new Oreo thins?
Yes, I love those.
I love them. Whereas my husband says the double stuff is the right ratio of filling to cookie. I think the thins are better.
Okay, see, I like both.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
When I was younger, I used to love it when they were dipped in white fudge.
White fudge Oreos are like the best.
Interesting. See, I'm a fan of Newman's O's makes a mint one that I'm a huge fan of. It's like a mint Oreo. Yeah, those are the best. Those are my favorite.
I don't buy those ever. Like I see them and I say no because the pack is mine then. Like I don't share.
You are wise. You are wise. Yep.
So they stay in the store.
Should we just talk about Oreos or are we going back to the writing thing?
I'm sorry. We're back. We're back to substance. So like substance. Oh my God.
No. I was actually going to talk about your podcast.
Yeah, sure. No, the podcast was so much fun. I got to write. We had been talking about starting a podcast for a long time. And the we is one of my closest friends, KJ Del Antonia. And she has a book, The Chicken Sisters, coming out it's about two sisters and fried chicken. And it comes out on December 1st. It comes out in 1 week from today. We're so excited. And she's lovely. And she was my New York Times. She was my editor at the New York Times for years. And we became really close friends. And so she and I started this podcast. And then we had Serena Bowen, who's a best-selling romance author. She joined us. And essentially we talk about just the business of getting writing done. We talk about money. We talk about time. We talk about, when writing is your side hustle versus when you're full-time writing. And we talk about the bookkeeping. We talk about marketing, promotion. We talked about publicists just recently. And since Serena is self-published for the most part, and a very successful self-published author, she talks a lot about the business of self-publishing. It's a way for us to get together with other authors and talk about, all of the fun parts of writing and all the not so fun parts of writing too, the hard parts, but also how you actually, our tagline is keep your butt in the chair and your head in the game. That's basically what we talk about.
I love it.
I've enjoyed listening to your podcast as a way to procrastinate from writing my book. My body's in the chair. And my head is in the game because I'm listening to the podcast.
We have some great interviews coming up that I'm really excited about too in the new year. So it's going to be really fun. We're going to be talking about the one, we've been able to talk about to like people that I'm a total fangirl of. Like we talked to David Sedaris, and we talked to Anna Quinlan, and we've talked to Jennifer Weiner. We're talking to Beverly Jenkins. We're talking to Lissa K. Adams. We're just all these amazing people that, you know, I just want to know how they do the work. You know, we sort of we don't ask questions like, you know, where do your ideas come from? Because that's a question we always get. And yes, we answer questions like, how do you get an agent and how do you pitch a book and stuff like that. But for the most part, we really just want to know, like, what's your process? How do you get the work done? How do you know when the research is done? How do you translate the research to the writing? All that kind of stuff that's just, you know, inside baseball on writing. That's the fun stuff. Plus I get to chat with my friends once a week. And how fun is that?
I was just about to say that's
Super
gonna
cool. Just to have an excuse to sit next to you. You're like,
yeah,
best friend in the world. Winona.
Yeah, hi Jade.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
I would like to say that I appreciate that you guys do not ask the questions that always get asked. As I'm going to brag a bit, as the 18th most interviewed author in the world, we have been asked the same questions over 850 times.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
well, it's fun to get one every once in a while that's like, oh, it's new. Not
Yeah.
hard, like to talk about ours. Just new.
We do like to talk about the business
Yep.
writing behind like the actual, right? Winona, whatever. She knows she doesn't talk about the business behind, right? She just says that. She just says that. No, she really does. And I appreciate when people do talk about the business behind, right?
Yeah.
Because being prepared is kind of like half the battle. Like,
yeah.
we
interviewed Celeste Headley, who works for NPR, and it was in a recent episode, and she was talking about asking questions that no one else has asked before, and how that can be a really powerful way to get inside someone's head. She asked, you know, and she gave some examples in the podcast. And Celeste is great because she's such a good listener, and her preparation is so thorough. And so she has this incredible book called Herd Mentality. It's all about becoming a better interviewer. And it really just comes down to know your material inside, know the person's material inside and out, and have some new questions that no one's ever asked them before. Because it's so much, isn't it fun to watch an interview when someone's like, oh my gosh, I have never gotten that question before. And it makes the person feel appreciated, like you've gone to the trouble to really learn something about them. It's really fun.
Well, we won't be walking away from this interview being like, oh my gosh, like they really went through the trouble.
Well, we talked about Oreos.
we did, and it was failure.
No one has ever asked me about Oreos before, so there you go.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it because it's almost December, so we're like, come on, Snow, come on, Oreos, come on.
Yeah. My son is mostly no sugar and vegetarian, except one day a month. So last month it was his birthday, and this month it's going to be Thanksgiving. And so he has asked me specifically to make some homemade cookies so that at 12:01 on the day of Thanksgiving, he said, I think he even said, so I can hover over them like a gremlin and stuff them in my face, I believe was his
Yes,
quote.
absolutely. That's exactly how you need to hover over cookies with sugar. That is exactly how I would imagine it if I cut sugar out of my life, which probably will be never. Like, that's what I
did it for
I hear ya.
And it was the last day of every month I allowed myself sugar. Do you understand? For the last day of every month I bought a cake and ate the whole thing.
Oh my goodness.
Did it change your perception of sweetness though? Like when you weren't eating? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Like an apple became my new candy.
That's what my son has said. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, oh my goodness. And now I'm like, oh, my apple is my new candy. And I eat it. And I'm like, no, an apple is an apple. Candy is candy.
Well, she's like,
a cake is a cake.
She's here with Jade, and I stress bake. Like I really like it. I really like to stress bake. So yeah.
Do you think
at the beginning of the pandemic, I did a lot of baking. I watched the British baking show, Bake Off, did a lot of stress baking. And then we all started to gain a lot of weight. And I'm like, I got to back off the baking a little bit, I think.
I call it the pandemic 20. So, like it's like the freshman 20s. Pandemic 20.
My husband calls it the COVID-19. So yeah, there you go.
Okay, see, that is actually better. We tell your husband that we're gonna steal that. But
he gets a lot of practice because he's an infectious diseases doctor and a medical ethicist. So he does, like, I do interviews about Oreos. He does interviews about, COVID and the vaccine coming out and all of that sort of stuff. So, we all have our lane.
Wow,
I'm sorry. Your
so-
kids must feel like super stressed now.
Yeah.
Like between an infectious doctor
These
expert
yeah.
and the parenting teacher. Oh, I couldn't live in that
And a New
household.
York Times bestseller.
Selling- Oh my word.
Whew,
No.
I feel the stress here. I'm like, I don't even. I'm not even.
Yeah, no,
stressed.
honestly, I'm like, we got to get off this interview. This is not being as perfect. This is not up to their standards.
But anyway,
I've got kids who definitely picked their own lanes. I don't think they feel a lot of pressure to sort of compete. They're in their very own lanes. So
well,
that
that's
is
really cool.
awesome.
So where can people check out more about you and the upcoming book
And
the podcast?
at jessicalahey.com is everything is there. All the books, there's links to, if you go there under speaking, there's a big button that says download speaking bibliography. And it's like all of my favorite books about parenting, education, just learning in general. There's all kinds of resources there. And if you sign up for, a little box comes up and says, sign up for my newsletter. If you sign up there, you get all kinds of links to videos and all kinds of other stuff. So yeah. That's where you find out everything about me. And I'm over at Twitter all the time at Jess Lahey.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Jade, would you like to wrap us up?
Absolutely. You can find out everything your ladies are doing on www.andwethought.com. While you're there, go to the homepage, go down. Like it's like right there on the right-hand side. You'll see the new podcast that we're coming out with, which is the Ladies' Tales podcast, where people get to read Winona's script, and third episode.
Professional actors read my script.
Yes, so the third episode should be out soon. And more importantly than all of that, though, take a moment, go to the ladies tab, go down in the middle, see the charities that we probably support. Maybe you can support them too. And if you can't, maybe you could just add them on social media or send them a nice email and say, thank you so much for doing this wonderful work in the world, because we can all use some encouragement.
I'm
even
a
Winona,
narcissist, and I still need encouragement. So I know they need encouragement.
She doesn't need encouragement, but sure, we'll go with it for that sake. And just remember, y'all, that wisdom is all around you if
you're open to finding it and accepting it. So peace and love, you guys, from Winona
and Jade. Bye-bye. Oh, thanks for listening.